was speaking before me has been stuck in traffic. So I thought rather than let you wait, let's get on with it and feed those brains as much as we can today. So hi, and welcome to the evidence-based marketing session this morning. Does anybody know what evidence-based marketing is? Okay, all right. So by the end of the session, you certainly will have an idea of what evidence-based marketing is and why, as marketers or strategists or media people, we need to really sit up and take note and understand what it is and why essentially it's probably, well, not probably, it is the future of marketing in terms of understanding consumer behavior and brands and how to put effective strategy in marketing, understand the marketing principles and strategies and how to be effective in that space. All right, so this morning in this section, I'm going to take you through context. Why science and marketing? Why is science and marketing merging? Why does it matter to us? What does it mean for marketing? Then the concept of consilience. I will then take you through observed consumer behavior, what that is. Behavioural economics. Behavioural economics is very topical at the moment. Is anybody doing any reading on behavioural economics? I hope after today you will be encouraged to explore that discipline quite actively. And then cognitive neuroscience and the emergence, obviously, of neuromarketing in our space. We'll then wrap it up, okay? I've got quite a lot to get through. I can get excited and go very quickly. So if I haven't landed something properly or you don't understand a concept properly, please put up your hand. If you've got questions, please let's unpack anything that you're not quite grasping so that you leave the session feeling comfortable with what evidence-based marketing is. Okay. All right. Let's start with a little bit of history in medicine. Does anybody know what this is? It was practiced for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's common practice within the medical fields around the world. You know what it is? For absolutely any illness. Yes, it's called bloodletting. And all medical staff for hundreds and hundreds of years believed that people that felt unwell from a headache to serious illness or emotional upheaval, they felt that you had produced too much blood in your body, and so they just bled you out, essentially. And this was a very common form of medical practice for many years, up until actually the early 19s. Today it seems a little barbaric, because we understand that this obviously is not an effective way to treat medical treatments, or to treat medical illnesses. Does anybody know what this is? It's a little bit more gruesome. This was a huge scientific advancement. It's called a frontal lobotomy, also practiced for many, many years. And what people believed was that if you were too emotional or too moody, you had too many things going on in your brain. So what they did is they just stuck a pick into your eye and chipped away some of your brain to relieve the over-emotional state that you were in. This is a very, very famous doctor, and he did up to 10 of these frontal lobotomies a day, to try and treat these poor patients who were having emotional distress. Okay, are there any moms in the audience? All right, so in the 1700s, there obviously moms gave birth to children and they were loud and they were unsettled and they were very busy waxing their moustaches and putting their corsets on. They didn't have time to deal with these babies. So they had Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, very commonly widespread using way to calm babies. And obviously it was highly effective, and I'll tell you why it was highly effective. Because it was revealed that it had morphine sulfate, chloroform, morphine, chloride, codeine, heroin, powdered opium, cannabis, and a whole wide range of very strong drugs in it. All right, so there is a reason I'm taking you through all these stories, just to sort of give you some context in terms of evidence-based medicine. Evidence-based practice was established only in 1972 by a Scottish-born doctor, Dr. Cochrane, and researcher, and he highlighted gaps between research and clinical practice and advocated for an international collaboration and systematic review of clinical trials. All right, and what has this got to do with marketing? I will take you there. But as you can see, once this term evidence-based marketing was introduced, can you start to see that they start to get more scientific and clinically relevant research. So in 1992, it was the practice of evidence-based marketing was introduced, and it took many years till in 2001 you can see it starts getting used as a mainstream medical practice. So it was introduced, and then it was new, and then it gains traction, and now, as we know today, evidence-based medicine is absolutely common practice. All right, and as you can see, the results for us and our ability to live longer, healthier lives is absolutely dramatic once evidence-based medicine is put into practice. Okay, and that's really important because it went from practicing armchair theories or what people thought was the right way to treat medicine or to treat patients to much more empirical evidence-based medicine, to say what is the cause, how do we treat it, and how do we research it and add science to medical treatments. All right, luckily for us, medicine is not the only field that has benefited from evidence-based practice. Science has transformed every discipline that it has touched, from economics to psychology to the way we are teaching our children in schools. People are applying much more rigorous science-based research into these disciplines for more effective results. And I'm really happy to tell you that marketing is absolutely no exception to this space. We have introduced evidence-based marketing. There is a lot of very reputable, well-known marketing people in our industry doing incredibly good work in this space. All right, so welcome to the science of marketing. We now have evidence-based practice underpinning our marketing theories, and these new findings, grounded in science, have overturned many of our common held beliefs about how marketing really works in the real world. And there are really a lot of marketing myths that have been debunked through evidence-based practice. Unfortunately, today I can't take you through them. We don't have enough time. Today I just wanted to introduce you to why evidence-based marketing practice exists and why you should pay some attention to it. By applying scientific knowledge to the field of marketing, sorry, this curtain decides it wants to give me a boost. We are able to remove guesswork in terms of what marketing is and what effective marketing looks like. And we are able to avoid common marketing mistakes that we make. And we can apply rules to creative, effective marketing. We've got a sort of set of rules and a structure that we now know what effective marketing works and why it works, and consumer behavior and why consumers behave the way they do, and good creative and why good creative is effective versus non-creative. In the past, there was a lot of guesswork, a lot of gut feel, but now we've got much more empirical and rigorous research in terms of what effective marketing looks like. All right, so the implications for us as marketers are absolutely enormous in terms of understanding evidence-based marketing. This is a really nice book. I'm going to show you lots of books today. It's called The Anatomy of the Humbug. But what he does, Paul Feldwick, is he debunks a lot of where marketing theory comes from in terms of things like the 80-20 rule, brand loyalty. Where do all those theories come from, and why is there no science behind those theories? Which is a really nice start to understanding why a lot of our previous knowledge of marketing was armchair theory or good intuition, but not based in science. All right, so once we go into marketing, evidence-based marketing, we're allowed to debunk a lot of these myths and highlight to empirical evidence that we can base our marketing strategy on. Okay. Can we have a recap? So let's recap. Doctors used to be pretty crappy and totally hardcore when it came to treating certain conditions. Up until recent years, marketing and other major disciplines were based mostly on these armchair theories. Science saves the day. We really have, as marketers, got to love science and psychology and research so we can be at the forefront of our discipline and practice good evidence-based marketing. All right, the concept of consilience. Does anybody know what consilience means? Okay, it's a very old word, and I'm going to unpack it for you with I'm trying to give it some new sexiness now as we talk about evidence-based marketing. Let's start with a story about wine. I'm a big wine fan. All right, so to give you a quote from a company that named their wine Consilience, we ran across the world while kicking ideas around from our winery. It seemed to explain the way we came together as partners, putting a word to the way that our divergent background experiences were being meshed together to create a connected and coherent business entity with the goal of making really good wine. All right, I'll take it a little bit further for you. Consilience as a word was first defined by the 19th century philosopher William Whitwell as a way to describe the interlocking explanations of a cause and effect amongst disciplines. A more casual definition is the unity of knowledge. So what consilience is taking different disciplines but finding the takeouts, the common takeouts where there's agreement, and using that. I will take it a step further for you. So marketing consilience, if we term that, is using modern science to bring a new approach to marketing and communication practice, or the mutually supporting convergence of seemingly unrelated disciplines gives us huge strength in the ability to do effective marketing. All right, hang tight, I am going to land it for you in terms of where I'm going with this. So if we go back to the wine definition, there are disciplines being meshed together to create connected and coherent understanding of consumer behavior with the goal of doing extraordinary marketing. All right. If we give it to you in an image, we've got concepts and concepts, but we come together with communal understanding in terms of what really effective marketing looks like by using scientific disciplines. And that's where I'm going to take you now. All right. So the implications for evidence-based marketing, specifically with today, is we've had huge advances in research techniques, coupled with a much deeper understanding of cognitive psychology and brain function, that's your neuroscience, have converged to provide us with the knowledge to do much better marketing. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. All right, so we've got new sexy disciplines that have come into our space, which is really exciting. The result, using hard science to set a few things straight. Any Big Bang fans here? Big Bang Theory, I'm a huge fan. All right, so the biggest influences in terms of creating this consilience in this evidence-based marketing practice is number one, observed consumer behavior, which is the research techniques and the empirically based research techniques. Behavioural economics, which gives us a good understanding of cognitive psychology, and then cognitive neuroscience, which is obviously our insight into how brains work. Right, so these are the three disciplines that come together through consilience to understand consumer behaviour, branding, the role of brands in marketing space, and many, many more things. All right, and I'm going to take you through what these three things are in detail this morning. All right. Observed consumer behavior. Observed consumer behavior is a measure of in-market actual purchasing behavior. What is the difference between observed consumer behavior and a focus group? Observed consumer behavior is actual behavior. When you sit in a focus group, you are interacting with people. You don't know if there's research bias, you don't know what mood they're in, you don't know if they're buying the products they think they're going to buy. So there's a lot of bias and a lot of grey area. Is there a place for focus groups? Absolutely. But this is much more scientific in order to see how people are actually behaving, what they're actually purchasing in field, and so it's much more solid. All right. So it's not claimed behavior as you would have in a focus group. It's much more rigorous. Is anybody aware of the Ehrenberg Bass Institute of Marketing Science and who they are? Good man. I highly recommend you get familiar with them. But they are the pioneers of observed consumer behavior. And because we're time-strapped today, I'm going to take you very briefly through who they are. Anybody, have you read How Brains Grow? Good man. All right. who they are. They're the world's largest center for research marketing. In marketing, they're made up of the largest group of marketing academics in the world, 56 marketing profs, hundreds of lecturers and graduates. I have been very fortunate to have been exposed to them for the last 22 years of my marketing career, and I've met a few of the professors. All right, they collaborate over 6 universities around the world, and what they really, and why they really exist, sorry, I'm dancing around this curtain, is to put the science back into marketing research and say how are consumers behaving and what are the patterns we can pick up and how do we use this all through empirically based observed consumer behavior. They were founded by Professor Ehrenberg. They're in 30 countries. They've been doing research for 40 years. And what they do, the crux of what they do is they look for universal patterns of behavior that reflect how markets work. All right. And as in science, they empirically prove how consumers behave in the real world. They use they use the word real world a lot in terms of how consumers behave, so we don't guess, we see what the research says, we compare patterns across countries, across categories, and they do all this really, really impressive research. They have debunked a lot of common held beliefs in their space. I'll show you their books now. I can't go into too much of it today because of time, but they've got some really incredibly big multinationals that are their sponsors. They also are not aligned to any company, so they're unbiased, they're researchers. What happens here is that they've got all these sponsors that give them money to go in and do field research. Paxton CTP or Spark Media is one South African corporate sponsor. To EBI. Distel also was a corporate sponsor for many, many years from South Africa's side. So yeah, this is a South African company and part of the same company here. The rest are big global companies. If you are interested in looking at their work, How Brands Grow is a book I highly, highly recommend you to get hold of. It was an international bestseller in its space, and as the CEO of Nielsen said, until every marketer applies these learnings, there will be a competitive advantage for those who do. So what happened is they launched this book. Byron Sharp wrote this book, and the marketers in the emerging world said, yeah, that's fine, but these are big first world countries that you've done research in. What about the rest of the world? What about emerging markets? Do the patterns look the same? Is the research relevant? Can we apply it? They said, yes, sure, we can. They also said, what about services? What about super luxury brands? Do your patterns apply there? Can we apply your principles to this market? And they said, sure, we will do that. And they then launched this How Brands Grow too. So if you're in banking or luxury brands, if that's your game, then I highly recommend that you get How Brands Grow too. Some of our South African research that's commissioned by Spark Media has been featured in this book.
Then cryptocurrency marketing.
Cryptocurrency, because it's online. I am not sure actually. I don't know too much about cryptocurrency, but it's a service. So it would be financial services. So I would absolutely. Sorry. I would absolutely assume so. Yeah, but I don't know enough about the cryptocurrency space too. Yeah. So the Steve campaign, you know, the very successful Steve campaign is featured in this book from South Africa. Okay. Launched last year, and I absolutely love this book. Is building distinctive brand assets. So what they then have done is they've gone and said, that's cool, here are patterns, this is how consumers behave, this is how consumers shop, this is what brands look like in certain categories. And what Jenny Romanek then does is write a really interesting book, which I'm very passionate about the branding space. This is, how do you make sure that your brands are distinctive in a highly competitive world? All right, and she unpacks that. The big debate here is whether brands need to be different or distinctive. They go in depth in terms of why distinctiveness is much more important in this very competitive space and how to create a brand that is distinctive. Okay. Right, so what are the outcomes that EBI come up with? There's millions of consumers and they stubbornly show the same patterns across categories, across markets, across LSMs, if you want to talk in South African language, or SEMs. And what happens is they now have simple, trustworthy, quantified findings with major implications for us marketers. Okay. So let's recap. EBI is the world's largest centre for marketing research. They've been in 30 countries for over 40 years, and they show these universal patterns of consumer behaviour, and essentially they give you the empirical marketing laws. All right, guys, so I've run a course to take you through what all of these are, but it's a 2-day course just to give you the top line. So I can't get into it today, sadly, but I am wanting to just entice you and get you curious to go and explore this new marketing and this empirically based, evidence-based marketing. All right, so let's take a look. We've looked at the research techniques, observed consumer behavior. EBI are not the only ones that are doing this. However, they are a very good example of a company and a global research house that is doing it incredibly well. RPA in the UK is doing it incredibly well, and it's gaining traction through all the major industries around the world, and hopefully in South Africa. All right, let's take a look at the cognitive psychology in terms of behavioural economics. We had one gentleman familiar with behavioural economics. Anybody heard of Daniel Kahneman? Okay, there we go, that's where I'm going to go. So what is behavioural economics? It's a method of economic analysis that applies psychological insights into human behaviour to explain an economic decision choice or decision making, all right? Or, sorry about the spelling, it came off Wikipedia, so it's American. Behavioural economics is a combination of economics and psychology that studies the effects of emotional, psychology, and social factors upon economic decision making of people and institutions. So essentially it's the collision of economics and financial decisions and understanding consumers and how they make the decision. Because there's always been a gap. We think we're rational and we make these really calculated decisions as humans, and behavioural economics debunks that to an extent really, really well. And I'm going to take you through where behavioural economics comes and why it matters to us as marketers to understand. All right, so classic economics says consumers are rational, there's a supply and a demand, and that's how decisions are made. Psychology or advertising say that us humans are completely emotional and that we get persuaded to behave in a certain way. What behavioral economics say is that humans are predictably irrational. By no means do I say that irrational is stupid. It does not mean that by any means. It just means we sometimes make decisions that don't make logical sense if you break them down. We have these constant flaws in our decision making, and I will take you through that in more detail now. And this has been empirically proven and true for the significant majority of us humans and how we behave. Where does behavioral economics start? The story starts with two friends who forever changed how we think about how we think. Michael Lewis writes a really interesting book called The Undoing Project. Does anybody know Moneyball? It's a very famous movie. Michael Lewis wrote that. He also did The Undoing Project. And what this book is, wrong way, is about one of the greatest partnerships in the history of science. So that's Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, and they did a huge study over many years of how we as humans make decisions when faced with uncertain situations, and how ultimately our mind makes mistakes when we make decisions. And they are certainly the forefathers of behavioral economics, and they created this discipline. It has since exploded across all disciplines: economics, teaching, and marketing, obviously. And Daniel Kahneman recently won a Nobel Prize for his work in this space. Very interesting. He was the first psychologist ever to win an economics Nobel Prize. So can you see the consilience and the emergence of disciplines that is happening not only in marketing, it's happening everywhere. People are learning to understand human behavior and applying it to all disciplines. All right. He's very, very famous for his book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Have you guys heard of this book? Okay, unless you really, really want to delve into behavioral economics, this is quite a hard read. It's very scientific, and a lot of people have picked out the key learnings and applied it in a much easier way to sort of digest the concept. But if you love it, please go for it. But it's quite an academic read. The key takeout, however, from Thinking Fast and Slow is that Daniel Kahneman says we have two minds. One is a fast mind, and it's called your System 1. The other is your slower mind, and it's called System 2. Anybody heard of System 1 and System 2? Okay, let me take you through it now. Alright, so let's put that we've got this fast mind and we've got a System 2. So there you have your brain. In Daniel Kahneman's work, System 1, it's much faster, it always leads the pack. Brain 2, a little bit slower and sluggish. And we always jump between System 1 and System 2 when we're making decisions as humans. Alright, this is new to all of you, so let me know if I go too quickly, alright? So, who can tell me what this man is feeling? Immediately, he's feeling, is he happy? He's angry. Did you know that immediately? Okay, that's your System 1 at work. He knows immediately. You take in all that information. His nose is scrunched, his eyes are angry, his teeth are showing, and immediately your brain goes, oh, he's angry, maybe step back. And you'll react without thinking. If you are walking in the Kruger National Park and you see a lion, what do? You run. Or you scream, or you see a snake. You react immediately. That is your System 1 that works. It is impulsive, it works quickly, and there's a very good reason you have that system. And it's for survival, to make you aware and survive when things are dangerous, or you're in a situation you shouldn't be in. It's also to make you efficient, so that you can move through things quickly. Alright. It does make errors, however. If a bat and a ball together cost R1.10, and the bat costs R1 more than the ball, how much will the ball cost? Does anybody want to take a stab?
5 cents.
5 cents. Have you seen this before?
No, you calculate.
Anybody else? 5 cents? 10 cents? Alright, the ball costs 5 cents, and you were incredibly smart. Most people say 10 cents. Intuitively, you want to say 10 cents. But if it's R1 more, then R1 and 5 cents plus 5 cents gives you R1. Are you with me? 9 cents. Okay, all that I'm trying to show you here is that your brain works quickly to keep you efficient, but it does sometimes make errors. And that's your System 1 that keeps you efficient, but it's not 100% accurate all the time. 2 plus 2, 4, quick and easy. Okay, this one. Can you feel your brain jig into a different space? Okay, System 1, System 2. Your brain doesn't like this, it's uncomfortable. Did you feel yourself go, oh, I need a paper, I need a calculator? Immediately you get uncomfortable. It doesn't like to go there. It likes to be fluid and quick and work nice and quick. It prefers to stay here in System 1. System 1, which is fast, intuitive, it doesn't use a lot of energy, it's unconscious, but sometimes it doesn't make rational decisions. It's that irrational element that Daniel Kahneman talks about all the time. System 2 is slow, reflective, it is high energy, it uses up a lot of energy, but it is your more rational system. Alright, we like to think that we sit in System 2 a lot, but we don't go there very often. We only go there when it's really necessary, because it chews up a lot of energy and it makes us slow as humans or as consumers. Alright, so the brain has developed shortcuts to keep up us processing things quickly. System 1 tries to automate your responses. System 1 wins most of the time. We like to camp in System 1. System 1 is largely responsible for day-to-day operational control, which is your driving, your speaking, and obviously your shopping. How many of you like to sit in an aisle for 5 to 10 minutes trying to decide what washing powder to buy? No, you don't. Or cheese, or bread. Do we sit and look, or do we take our trolley and go as fast as we can and put our things in our trolley? If you can't, if you go into a category, I had to go buy perfume the other day, I'm not familiar with it, and I just stood. And then I got all uncomfortable because now I'm standing, I don't know how to make the decision, it's hard. We don't shop like that often. Sometimes we do, but most of the time we try to move as quickly as we can. All right. It has flaws, it's inaccurate, it sometimes answers what it feels right, it's inconsistent in its decisions, and it's influenced by non-consciously perceived messages from the environment. Okay, does this make sense? Are you guys understanding System 1 and System 2? It's a big concept to grasp. If you haven't heard of it, you will now see that it is used very commonly now that you know. People use it all the time. It's a very popular concept that people are applying to so many things. Right, System 2, it's reliable, but it's completely lazy. We only go there as humans if we have to. All right. So it's a System 1 world most of the time. System 1 is far more influential and powerful. It governs the majority of our decisions, and there's very good reason for it. It helps us survive, and it helps us save energy. We use instinct and intuition to make our decisions. All right, guys, what has this got to do with marketing, essentially? This sounds like a lot of psychological blabber, but as marketers, it's incredibly important that we understand how people are making decisions, because that's what we're in. We're in marketing, we want to influence consumer decisions. We need to understand how they're making decisions, how our brains are wired to make these decisions. So certainly in my mind, insight into how consumers make decisions is incredibly important, and integrating behavioural economics into your marketing practice really can give you a huge competitive edge in terms of understanding consumer behaviour and understanding how people are wired to make their decisions, and if you take it down, how people are wired to make the brand decisions they make and why they make decisions like they do. All right, hugely popular around the world. There's actually an explosion of behavioural economics. Dan Ariely, anybody heard of Dan Ariely? It's very popular in this space. He's written lots of books. Robert Cialdini also written a huge amount of books in this space. Decoded, I highly recommend for guys. This is, if I had to recommend 2 books, or 3, it would be this one, and this one. Choice Factory is very interesting. One of the guys at Ogilvy, he's an advertising man, and the Choice Factory, 25 behavioural biases that influence what we buy. So this is actually an ad man that wrote that. The others are all psychologists. All right. IPA in the UK, a huge application of behavioural economics in their space. They've rejigged all the awards and all of their criteria of how they judge creative according to behavioural economics. Okay. I have just touched the surface on behavioural economics. What we then delve into, and you can delve into, is biases. So what are the flaws in the decision making that consumers have, or how we wired? How can you reframe your marketing and your communication to work with the brain in terms of understanding System 1 and System 2? So there's really a whole lot of literature that can really gear you to understand consumer behaviour and decision making. Right. So everybody comfortable with behavioural economics? Okay. I absolutely love this space. I studied psychology and then marketing, so this is my sweet spot. I love it. All right. So study of behavioural economics has a huge implications in the field of marketing and communication. System 1 and System 2 form the foundation of understanding these implications. Companies, books, conferences, absolute explosion in terms of applying behavioural economics into the marketing field. And as I did mention, it is being applied in all fields, but for the sake, obviously, of us in our space, it's incredibly relevant for evidence-based marketing and for marketers. Okay. All right, so we've done the cognitive psychology and the concept. Let's look at cognitive neuroscience. I'm sure everybody's heard of neuro-marketing. It's been around for a couple of years. So the application of cognitive neuroscience to marketing, applying the methods of neurology, of the neurology lab to the questions of the advertising world. That is pretty much what it is. We've got really good equipment and understanding. The advancements in technology have allowed us to understand how the brain, a little bit more of how the brain works. We obviously have a lot of work to go. But certainly, what does advertising do and marketing do to the brain, and how, by understanding the impact of advertising to the brain, we can make more effective advertising and understand how advertising works with the consumer brain or the human brain. All right. Marketers are fascinated with cognitive neuroscience and understandingly so. New brain imaging techniques seem to promise access to deeper insights into how people think about brands and what motivates their purchase. But more valuable to marketers than any brain imaging tools are the advances in neuroscience that neuroscience has provided in our understanding of how the brain works. In light of this new knowledge, they may choose to reconsider and refine their approaches to advertising and brand building. All right. So again, these advances in the technology are allowing us to understand from a more scientific perspective of what effective marketing does and how consumers make decisions. All right. The field of neuromarketing. In recent years, marketers enthralled with the possibilities of applying neuroscience techniques to consumer research have teamed up with brain science experts eager to find commercial applications for their work, thus giving rise to the field of neuromarketing. All right. Where did this all start? Is anybody familiar with this very famous study between Pepsi and Coke? It's a very, very famous study that demonstrated that. So what they did is there was a blind test. They had consumers and a panel, and they did a blind test between Pepsi and Coke. When they asked the consumers from the blind test what taste they preferred, 50% said Pepsi and 50% said Coke. When they then told the consumers what the brands were, Coke came out far stronger. So then what people said was, hang on a minute, it's not only based on the taste of the product, brand must play some kind of role in terms of people's perception of a product. And brands obviously are a lot more powerful than we thought they were in the past. So the study demonstrated that Pepsi should have had half the market, logically 50% liked the taste. In reality, consumers are buying Coke for reasons related less to their taste and more to the experience of the Coke. And perhaps that our brains don't work as logically as we previously thought. And this was early days. This is an old study, but this was certainly the start of neuroscience, saying, okay, let's understand the brain a little more. Again, part of our industry that is alive and kicking, conferences, books, by the hundreds. Guys, if I can just tell you to please caution that if you do go into the space and research it, make sure that it is a reputable company that you are using. It's a very big buzzword, neuromarketing. So people are using it everywhere. So just make sure when you do look that it's not a fly-by-night person, that they are proper. They've got scientists on board and neurologists, and they're doing this by the book. We have got a neuro lab in South Africa as well. Obviously very expensive for marketers. So the big guys around the world are managing to go to the space. It should be commercialized enough in the next 5 or 6 years that the smaller brands can go. But very, very, we can use the learnings that they're finding. All right. Right, and there's a really good reason. Again, like I said, observed consumer behavior is how people are actually behaving. Neuromarketing allows you to know how your brain actually responds to advertising. And this is a more recent study where they found subjects that wanted to stop smoking, and they put them in a lab. I mean, it's very sexy. They put them in a lab, and they showed them 3 different advertising executions. And they asked them to say which ad do they think would be more effective to stop people from smoking. The way they tested that was a call line to say how many people responded with the call to action at the end of the ad. The subjects that self-reported from the survey said that B would be more popular. The guys that did their fMRI The fMRI is like an MRI on steroids. It's just a newer version of MRI. Said that obviously C would be more popular, and you can see in the real world response how the scientific study was much more accurate than asking the respondents. Does this make sense? I'm going quite quickly because I'm going to run out of time. All right, there's some really, really cool tools that they use in this space. So they watch your eye tracking, they do your skin temperature, they watch your facial expressions, they do track your brain waves. So really, really a very sexy space if you like pure science, because that's what this is. So if you can, I'm not going to do it for the sake of time today, but if you YouTube, there's lots of these examples where you can see they play ads and they show you what parts of the brain light up when certain elements are playing, and how the body responds, your brain responds to music and eye contact and so on. Or you can see they're tracking where their eyes are, they track engagement, they're doing your heart rate, they're watching your attention, and they can start being very scientific in terms of creating very effective creative that works with the brain and how it responds. All right. Do you guys think that rational or emotional advertising is more brain friendly? Emotional, absolutely. So when you see that you're starting to track engagement and feelings, and what they now aim for is they're trying to make sure you light up the emotional centers. There's a whole lot of science behind why emotional advertising is more effective and how to apply it, but you'll see now that there are companies that test ads and see how emotional your emotional centers light up. All right, so the application of cognitive neuroscience to the field of marketing is really growing. Technological advances have allowed us to better understand how the brain works and how we respond, to better understand consumer behavior and the impact that marketing and advertising has on the brain, and obviously that is neuromarketing that will continue to grow. All right, is everybody with me? It's a very, very, very exciting space that we're going into, and there's some really good, delicious literature that you can look at. All right, so let's look at one example of consilience in terms of today as marketers. I've introduced you to these guys. Remember that it's a System 1 world, and we try and make decisions as quickly as we can, and we try to remain as fluid as we can, and there's very good reason for that. In terms of how we're wired, our brain is very, very smart. The cognitive neuroscience people agree. Neuroscience have shown that most of our decision making is automatic, intuitive, and distinctive, and it's in the rapid response part of our brain. Can you see the synergy from the different disciplines in understanding how we make decisions as consumers? It's widely known that up to 95% of our behavior is in some way driven by non-conscious process. With regards to consumer behavior, consumers make most of their decisions unconsciously in an automatic, rapid response manner, and neuroscience is the practice of measuring that unconscious. So behavioral economics says we are wired to make quick snap decisions in System 1 most of the time. Neuroscience is saying we absolutely agree, we have the tools to see what happens in that unconscious mind. So they can just build all these blocks. What EBI is saying, and this is just the top line of one example I'm giving you. EBI is saying, How Brands Grow, one of the books, suggests that brand consideration is not so much considered as it is emotional. All right, because System 1 is your emotional brain, which means that being mentally available, a very big EBI term, when consumer is shopping in your category, is key, but perhaps not as complex as some marketers would have thought in the past. All right, so what they're saying is we know decision making is emotional, which is your intuition, which System 1 talks about, and it's not as complex as we used to think. We make decisions as quickly as we can. All right, when it comes to brands. So decision making and the implications for brands. What would you guys think? Does this now make sense in terms of how we understand consumers making decisions for each and every brand that they put in their trolley? Does everybody recognize this from their marketing textbook? Okay, there's much more complicated ones, but we have a problem, we then search our problem, we then evaluate all our alternatives, we then know we're going to make a purchasing decision, we then purchase, we then do a post-purchase evaluation. Knowing what we've spoken about today, does this make sense as a model? No, it doesn't make sense. Imagine think of your own behavior, guys, in a shopping center. Do you sit and evaluate and think about your problem for every single brand that you put in your trolley? No. Even things like, people always say to me, but what about cars? I evaluate cars so much. I'm like, that's fine, but we've got 400 brands in our 400 brands of cars in South Africa. You might pick 3 very quickly that you know, and then you will evaluate. But that decision to consider those brands is very quick and intuitive, and then you will go and unpack. So brand decisions, it's called mental availability. Those brands that are fluid and come to mind quickly are the brands that you will consider when you make a decision. You certainly don't have the time and energy to do this for every brand choice that you do. So the easier your brand is thought of, the more chance it has of being considered when your consumers are in a shopping situation for your category. I'm just giving you very top-line ideas. So essentially, if you understand how we make decisions, you need to stop thinking that consumers are thinking about us all the time, and you need to, as a marketer, be as easy to think of when somebody's in your market as possible. Right, you need to work with the brain. What would you think that the primary benefit of a brand is then in terms of helping consumers make decisions? Absolutely, it's a shortcut. So who has ever in their life gone, what can I get you to drink? I don't know, I'll just have a Coke. Who's ever done that? It's a very strong brand. It came to mind easily. I didn't feel like thinking about it. And so it helped me make a shortcut of a decision I wasn't really thinking of. So that's exactly it. The primary benefit of a brand in a consumer's life is how do you help your brands be shortcuts and help the decision-making process easy for your consumers. All right, that is a whole nother lecture, but in terms of just giving you a switch in terms of where brands or what brands do in terms of helping consumers make decisions. All right, brands need to help us think less and respond more. The easier and more comfortable it is for us to grab your brand or understand why you're making that brand decision, the more you're working with the brand, the stronger your brand essentially. Okay, are there any questions at this point?